Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm senior web producer Ed Pernick, and joining me today is senior editor Matt Kenny.
Hey.
And no one else, because guess what? Mike Pekovich is on vacation.
I finally wasn't listed last.
He's at an undisclosed nudist camp in northern Maine. I don't want to come up with that. That would be a scary thought.
No, Mike is teaching at Mark Adams School.
Is he really?
That's where he is this week.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What's he teaching?
Ace is on vacation.
At a nudist camp in northern Maine.
No, Ace took his family to L.A. Lower Alabama. He's on the Florida Panhandle.
Right on. Well, listen, as always, if you like this podcast, be sure to spread the word to your fellow woodworkers. Stop by our iTunes page, leave a comment, maybe a rating. You can also catch us at iHeartRadio. Just do a search for Shop Talk Live. And I guess before we get started, there's a couple of things to talk about. I'll let you go first, Matt, because you just came back from a Lee Nielsen event.
I just came back from Maine.
Yeah.
Actually, I was not at a nudist camp.
Yeah, and?
It was even worse. It was a bunch of middle-aged woodworkers.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. That would be you?
Yes, it would be me. I was at the Lee Nielsen Open House for the second summer in a row at the Lee Nielsen factory in Mid-Coast, Maine. I think technically it's in a town called Warren, Maine.
And did Taunton make you sleep in a tent or
I
stay
did
out
not
in the
have
yard?
to sleep in a tent.
Okay, good.
I stayed in a hotel.
I wouldn't be surprised.
As I've mentioned before, the Lee Nielsen events are pretty cool. Not only is Lee Nielsen there with all their wares and educating the wood tool or hand tool using public about how to use woodworking tools, hand tools in particular.
Yeah.
But there were also a lot of great vendors there. Like there was a guy that sells exotic woods over eBay called Rare Woods USA or Rare Woods US, and
Not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor at all, but he had really cool stuff. I got a really nice piece of king wood from him, which is beautiful.
Okay.
I use it in an upcoming box. There was a guy there that hand makes leather shop aprons, which was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And Peter Galbert was there, fine woodworking author, and he recently wrote a book for some other press called The Chairmaker's Notebook.
Yeah.
Peter's a cool guy. Tim Maney was there, who is an awesome chair maker that lives in Portland, Maine.
And let's get to the important stuff. What did you buy?
All I bought was some lumber from that guy, some
That's
small
it?
pieces, and I bought a new blade for my low-angle block plane, which we're going to talk about later, why I bought that.
Okay.
And I have provisionally made a deal with the apron maker. One of my boxes, I was going to make him a box for some Vesper tools that he has to store them in, and he's going to make me an apron.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I can dig that.
Yeah. But while I was there, I met lots of listeners. Hello, all of you. Two of them in particular I said that I would mention because their story really struck me.
Okay.
It was a sweet, sweet story. It was Lucas and his dad, Peter, visiting for, I think, the second year in a row. I think I remember meeting Lucas last year. And Lucas walked up to the bench and said, "Oh, I love listening to the podcast," and was going on about it. And I asked his dad, I said, "It sounds like you don't listen to the podcast either." And he goes, "I didn't even know it existed until just now."
Nice.
Lucas is 19, and I think that's probably not the only media consumption he hides from his dad or his dad doesn't know about. But
right on.
He was a really nice young man. He helped me load my truck up on Saturday.
Cool.
And he was super enthusiastic, loves furniture making. And so, hello, Lucas. Tell your dad I said hi.
Hi, Lucas.
And to everyone else who came up and said they liked the podcast and loved the magazine, we greatly appreciate that. It's wonderful to hear.
Right on. All right. Well, so the title of this episode is Workbench Wisdom, and that's because we have a whole bunch of workbench questions. And speaking of workbenches, there's a little bit more segue information to get into here. The next Tools and Shops issue, which will come out in late October of this year, will feature what we are dubbing our ultimate workbench.
The last ultimate workbench you'll ever need.
That's right. And
5 tips and tricks.
I'm not going to give away everything about the design and whatnot. Suffice it to say that it's a hot-looking workbench. It's big. It's a little pricey to build. And I thought for those people who might be watching the video version of this podcast at shoptalklive.com, that we could roll, a good 20 or 30 seconds of part of the upcoming video workshop series.
Yes, but I will say, you said it is expensive to build. The way we built it, it was expensive, but we went all out.
Yeah.
We
Ultimate Workbench.
has an awesome base made out of cherry.
Yeah.
A big top made out of hard maple.
Yeah.
And some other really cool features that, but you could make it in a much more economical way.
Sure.
Yeah, so stop scaring off
But
the people, Ed.
you
We're trying to
shouldn't.
get them to buy the magazine and read
So,
it.
so I'm going to go ahead and play about 20 or 30 seconds. Now, you're not going to see the actual bench in this bit of video. This is just a portion. We went up to Hancock Shaker Village to get a look at some original benches from the 19th century that they have on display there. And this is you and Mike salivating over a 160-year-old bench that they had in the tannery, what they call the tannery, because I guess the workshop used to be a tannery. Wow.
Well, it was
Exciting.
a tannery after it was a wood shop. So
Okay.
it was really originally the wood shop.
So here we go. This is Matt and Mike, if you're watching this on video, checking out this bench.
Mike, is this the bench we're using for inspiration?
Yes, this is the bench Leslie was talking about. It was made right here at Hancock Shaker Village, and a lot of the furniture at the village was made right on this workbench.
That's pretty awesome. I can imagine myself making a lot of furniture on a bench like this.
Absolutely.
Now that I see it in person, I'm starting to wonder about the size. What do you think about it? Do you think it's too big for our shop?
Well, we're about 8 feet long, 30 inches wide. I think for our shop, I want to come down in both of those dimensions.
Okay.
With that out of the way, let's give a little love to our sponsor, Minwax. For more than 100 years, Minwax has been the leading brand of high-quality wood finishing and wood care products. From wood stains to clear protective finishes, plus solutions for wood preparation, maintenance, cleaning, and repair, Minwax products are requested by the do-it-yourself consumer, seasoned woodworkers, and professional contractors. You can find Minwax online at minwax.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest.
I just forgot that we were doing video.
What did you make faces at me?
No, I was doing this while you were reading
So
the
lame.
Minwax.
So anyhow, let's go on to our first question. It's going to be from John and Matt. I think we both need to pick up our energy.
Yes, all right.
See, it's 3:30, and it's beautiful outside, and we would both rather be outside.
Well, I was just down at the shop lugging 15-inch wide hard maple boards over the joiner.
Yikes!
So I'm a little
Sore?
No, just a little tired. Because I got to go back down and do some more milling.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
Well, first question. It comes from John. Here we go. The first workbench question of the day. I'm in the process of planning my second workbench and need some vice advice. My current workbench has served me well for many years, but it's showing its limitations since I've started introducing hand tools into the mix. I'm planning on installing a tail vise and need some help deciding if a leg vise or twin screw vise, a face-mounted, face vise, would be the right way to go for my second vise. Since I'm just starting my hand tool journey, I'd like to have a holding system that's flexible enough to grow with me as I continue to incorporate hand tools into my woodworking. All right, right off the bat, I know the first thing you're going to say. Get rid of that.
What? Leg vise?
Yes.
Yeah, no leg vise. Yeah, go with the twin screw vise. They're awesome. I've had one on that's the only type of vise I've ever had, face vise I've ever had, is a twin screw vise. Mm-hmm. I've used leg vices, I've used cast iron vices, I've used that kind of vise where it's one screw and it's got two guideposts, but it's wood jaws. I've used everything. Shoulder vices, all of them. They all suck compared to a twin screw vise. Can I say that?
Yes.
They do.
So he's going to have a tail vise and a twin screw potentially. Okay.
Yeah, you could even forego the tail vise and just use a twin screw. But
although since I only have a face vise now, I've sort of been, I wouldn't mind having a tail vise sometimes. I was thinking of installing one of those little, because I don't like having that whole movable huge block of wood for a tail vise. I was thinking of installing one of those poor man's tail vises, essentially just like the pipe clamp addition on the end of your bench.
Oh. Like
you know what I'm talking about?
I have any idea. No,
it's basically like it's a very rudimentary tail vise. So it's you don't have this huge block that moves left and right. You just have a pipe coming out of the end, and it's got a little vise end on it, and you can just use it to pinch stuff between dogs. It's handy.
You can retrofit that?
You can retrofit it.
And it's made out of a pipe clamp?
Something like that, and I can't remember who makes it, whether it was Jorgensen or it was Lee Valley, or I don't remember
Lee
who
Valley
makes it.
has an add-on tail vise. Maybe that's what you're thinking about.
That might be what I'm thinking of. I haven't
what you're
actually researched it
describing
much.
sounds like a John White contraption.
It wasn't a contraption. It's a manufactured item, and I think we had one in here for a while to look at or to test or something or other. I don't remember. It was a couple of years ago. But I liked it because it was super simple, and all I don't want any strength out of it or anything. I just want something to be able to gently pinch something between two dogs. That's it.
All right.
Lengthwise.
Maybe we should answer this guy's question.
Yeah.
I would
You
say
just did.
I
Face
did.
vise, twin
Face
screw.
vise. Yeah, twin screw vise are extremely versatile. You can put a case side between the screws and clamp it securely. Can't do that with a leg vise. You got to rig up some kind of rigmarole to clamp it in addition to the leg vise. So I would never do a leg vise ever. Twin screw vise all the way. That's me. I'm a twin screw man.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, here you go. Let's move on to the next question because it relates.
It
All right.
does.
This is from Andrew. and
Another bench-related question.
Another bench-related question, another twin screw-related question. He says, I'm going to be building a bench and want to use a twin screw vise on the face, but have found most are too expensive for me. Have you heard of building your own twin screw vise using 2 single vices? I've seen some cheap single screw vices for roughly $40. What would be the downside to doing this? The install seems fairly easy. So that's part one. He actually has a 2-part question.
So let's just answer part
So,
one first.
answer part one.
Because actually, I think I'm going to surprise you with my answer.
Go ahead.
Not only have I heard of making a twin screw vise on your own, I have actually done that.
You didn't surprise me. I knew that from our pre-show meeting, Matt.
Oh, you're supposed to act surprised.
Oh,
though,
sorry.
right?
Hold on. Say that again.
Not only can you make a twin screw vise, I have made one myself.
Really?
Yes.
How'd you do that?
Isn't that amazing? My first workbench, the first workbench I ever made when I lived down in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina,
Yeah.
home of Lizard's Thicket. Which is a good restaurant.
Okay.
Country cooking makes you good looking. I made it out of yellow pine, and I put a twin screw vise on there, and I couldn't afford a twin screw vise yet. And so what I did was got the Beal magic threader or whatever they call it. It's a
Wooden thread maker.
wooden thread maker. Use your router to do it on. And I got the big one that's like 1.5 inches. Bought some 1.5 inch dowel from them, and I made some 1.5 inch diameter wood screws and made 2 nuts, put them in the bench, and made a twin screw vise.
But you had 2 independent handles that you had to operate.
You had 2 independent screws, and I also, and because they're 2 independent screws that you're doing, I made I sort of slotted holes in the jaw for the screws to go through rather than making them really tight, so that it'd be easier to open to close the jaw, and also so you could skew it pretty nicely.
Okay.
The only downside of making your own vise, twin screw vise, whether you do it with wood screws or you do it with metal screws, is that there's no chain driving them like there is on the Veritas and the Lee Nielsen. So that means you do have to operate both at the same time. It's kind of a pain in the neck. Or you could push the jaw shut, close one, and then come back and close the other one. But not be able to open and close it with a single hand while in the other hand you hold the workpiece is kind of a pain in the neck.
So there is a solution.
There is, because if you go back and you look in the Workbench book by Scott Landis, you will see a homemade twin screw vise. The guy uses metal screws, and he put bike sprockets on each one.
Yeah.
And then he put a bike chain on it, and you could turn them together.
Sounds very Tim Rousseau.
Yeah, and I think the engineering there's a little more, because if you know, like I've installed both the Lee Nielsen vise and the Lee Valley vise, and they both have different ways to deal with getting the jaw closed tight, the screws both tight down, and then getting the chain to sync so that when so that they turn the same and it closes the jaw properly. So there's some engineering going on in there that you have to figure that out. But in theory, you could certainly make your own chain-driven twin screw vise. It's not something I would do because, like I've said many times before, every tool costs you time, money, and frustration. And a homemade chain-driven twin screw vise is going to be a lot of time, and for most of us, a lot of frustration.
Why don't you refresh viewers on what Tim Rousseau has done with bicycle sprockets? Tim Rousseau is the guy who did...
Not as sprockets.
What was it he did?
He
Derailleur.
He used a 10-speed derailleur.
Tim Rousseau, he's done 2 video workshops with us, soon to be 3. He did one on a little nightstandy cabinet thing years ago, and then he did the Asian-inspired hall table.
Floated top.
And then there was an article on floating a top, and now he's about to do a pedestal dining table for the magazine and on video. And so that's Tim Rousseau, and he is a very inventive cat. And what now did he do with a bicycle derailleur?
So he didn't like the feed rate on his joiner planer.
Yeah.
He didn't like the planer's feed rate. So he realized that the chain driving the gears on this joiner planer was bicycle chain.
Yeah.
So he went and got a 10-speed derailleur, which is the doohickey at the back that you use to change gears. And he rigged that up onto his joiner planer mechanism so that he could change the feed rate of boards going through.
So this is similar to how you, on a lot of drill presses, you change the speed by changing the pulley that you're using. It's the same idea, because a derailleur, it's activating different size, different diameter sprockets.
Yes. Now I don't know if he didn't have different size sprockets on there, but what a derailleur does is as it kind of opens and closes, and so it essentially can change the speed without actually changing gears a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think that's what he did. I've never seen it I've never opened up his machine and looked at it, but he's
Neat.
a very inventive guy.
All right, so Andrew's second question is, and because I live in Northern Ontario, Canada, we don't have any decent wood up here for cheap. Would using spruce, pine, fir lumber be good enough? And no, we don't get yellow pine up here. Have you heard of putting a sheet of plywood on top of a solid 2x4 bench to use as a disposable top?
No.
So what
kidding.
we have on our site are the plans for a very basic workbench that I think Asa did in an episode of Getting Started in Woodworking years ago, and it was 2 pieces of 3/4 inch MDF laminated together as a bench top, and it was and I think the legs were like 4x4 posts from the home center, and everything was, tied together with threaded rod, and it was just 2 sheets of MDF laminated together, and it worked pretty well, nice and smooth, not terribly expensive. So once you destroy it, just put a new one in.
But you could certainly make a bench out of SPF, which is usually when you go to the home center, and they use it a lot to make construction lumber, and it's usually called SPF, spruce, pine, fir, because I don't think they know actually what it is. So they say it's one of these things.
The Latin term would be El Cheapo Cheapicus.
Yes. But you could certainly make a bench and absolutely make the base out of it. And you could make the top out of it as well. And you could either make it so, and then somehow put a lip around it, so you could just screw a piece of MDF or plywood down to the top. You could use plywood; it's no big deal. And or you could just make the top really thick, and so because it'll get dinged up because it's really soft. And so as it gets dinged up, you could just hand plane it down, more often than you would a hardwood.
Yeah.
But sure, why not?
All right.
Ultimately, the thing is you want to get building furniture.
Yeah.
So just get some kind of bench built, and then get working.
All right.
He lives in Ontario. Is that where
Yep.
he lives? Okay, Northern Ontario, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. You could also make it out of beaver pelts.
Nice.
You probably have lots of those.
Beaver
up there.
pelts, and you could probably a good finish for it would be poutine.
Poutine.
Just rub the cheese sauce all over it. All right, let's move on to our first segment of the day. That's going to be Smooth Moves, where we cop to our most boneheaded workshop blunders. And do you have one, by the way? I hope you came prepared.
You go first.
All right.
I'll try to invent something.
So we have an upcoming video that you and I are going to produce on some hinge jigs. That's all I'll say. And as part of it, I went, because originally we were going to film this week, and we were in a meeting last week, and I was like, damn, we need a cabinet as a prop. So I ran over to the workshop and built a cabinet. It's just a kind of through dovetailed case and a little frame and panel door and a couple of shelves in it, a little pine back. Simple. And so as I'm doing the cabinet, I'm like, I'm going to put the back in a groove instead of a rabbet. So I'm looking at it. Grooves are always dangerous when you're putting a back in, and you'll see why. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, if I run, I can run the groove right through the tails, right, straight through. That's a through cut.
Yes.
And then where it corresponds with the pin board, you won't see it because it'll be hidden when the joint comes together. Good. Crank up the table saw. Good, beautiful groove. Do a dry fit. Wah, 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 wah. I was not doing a half-blind dovetail drawer.
You were doing
a through dovetailed case.
Yeah.
I'm staring at these little square holes, which are not difficult to patch. So I patched them. You can barely see them. And I was going to bring them onto the podcast, but we were going to record this podcast on Wednesday, and we ended up deciding to do it today. So I don't have the cabinet with me. But just, you've got to be careful when you're grooving anything.
Very frustrating.
Very.
Yeah.
So that's my smooth move for the month, probably.
I do have one, but it's not really the normal kind that we do, but I'm extremely upset about it. So last week, before I went to the Lee Nielsen show, I bought one of those new Veritas side clamping narrow blade honing guide setups to complement my Veritas honing guide. Mm-hmm. And because I'd seen the one we had here for review, and I've seen the review, and they're freaking awesome. So
yeah, I actually went to use that one in the shop the other day, and it was gone. Then I went looking for the 6,000 grit Waterstone. That was gone. It's like our shop is slowly disappearing. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, I might be able to help you with some of that.
Anyhow.
So anyway, and I was like, I'm just going to sharpen all of my chisels.
Okay.
So I got out all the chisels I normally use, which is about 10 to 15 chisels, something like that. And I sharpened them all, including my Japanese paring chisel, which I love. And so anyways, I'm up at Lee Nielsen, and they put up a big tent in their back parking lot. And then there's a bunch of workbenches in there, and they have a lot of just, demonstrators and such in there. So I'm back there, and I'm showing these people how I miter small parts for little boxes by hand.
Okay.
And I have my nice Japanese chisel out on my bench. And I go to do something, and I hit it. And that thing has a round handle, and it just starts rolling. Rolling. Boom, right off the bench into the gravel.
That's the end of that.
Hits a big old rock. And now there's it chipped the corner, and so now I got to go back and resharpen that thing.
You got to grind out the chip.
No, I don't. I wouldn't. Not that chisel. I wouldn't put that on a. I'll grind it on granite with sandpaper. That's what I'll do. I won't do it on my grinding wheel.
I did something similar to that a week ago with a nice chisel. I was doing some home buildy stuff, and that involved notching out for a new receptacle. And I didn't have my jigsaw handy. I didn't have a router handy, but I had a drill and I had a chisel. So I'm like, I'll just drill a bunch of holes, around the square that I'm doing, and I'll just kind of knock it out with a chisel. And I'm knocking. It's going really well. And then, clunk, I hit some sort of fastener in the wall with a big screw. And my heart just went, and I was afraid to look at it. And I looked at it. I was like, big, nasty chip.
Was it
right
one of
in the end
your furniture making chisels?
Yes.
That's why
Well, it was just cedar. It was rough sawn cedar was the siding that I was going. So it's like it was fine to do it with. I thought about it. I was like, should I really be using my good chisels? But no, it's cedar. It's soft wood. It's not gonna, And I had no idea what was behind I didn't realize.
You got to have some beater chisels around.
I do. I was just too lazy to go down in the basement and get one. But anyhow,
all right.
so touche.
Yes.
Going on to the next question. Matt, pick it up a little bit, man. You're so, do some jumping jacks.
Well, I have to say, so Sunday, I first of all, I got up at 5 a.m. Friday.
Yeah.
I drove up to Maine 5 hours.
Okay.
Get out of the car, and when I go to a Lee Nielsen event, I'm working as long as I'm at the Lee Nielsen event, even if it's over, because I'm the guy from Fine Woodworking and they're Lee Nielsen, so I'm always working. So I got, so I worked until like 9 o'clock that night or something. Go home, have an okay night of sleep. Get up the next morning, work from 9 until at least 12 hours that day.
Okay.
Woke up at like 4 in the morning because
Keep going.
up there the sun comes out at like midnight.
Yeah.
And so it woke me up. I get in my truck, 5 o'clock in the morning Sunday, drive back to Connecticut, and I'm just exhausted.
All right. You know what I had to say to that?
Oh gosh, come on, Ed. What are you going to
Wait
do?
right here. I'll be right back.
What do you... Ed, we're actually recording a podcast. He just left the room. I wonder where he's going. Now I'm talking to our cameraman. What's he doing, Jeff? I have no idea. Oh, my goodness. Well, this is not dead air and awkward at all, is it? Well, Ed is gone. Where did you get that?
There we go, Matt. This is for you.
Where did you
That's your
find?
little whiny violin.
Why do you have that?
I don't. Actually, Asa has that, and I took it from his office.
Why does Asa have it?
I don't know. No, actually, he's cleaning out his house because he's moving, and
he found
he's going to give away his child's violin apparently, and I've
Yeah.
been waiting to pull that out at some point when somebody whined, and this was too good of a moment.
You're such a jackass.
I hope that you entertain the crowd while I was doing that absurd thing. Anyhow, listen, let's go on to the next question.
I told him about your pending HR case.
Nice. This one comes from Kobe, who had written to us about a bench that he was building. And he writes, he says, look, I'm still working on my new bench. I took your advice and used the very thick oak beams I have for the legs. They're down to 5.5 inches square, cut to length. Now, my problem is I cut them with a handsaw. I made a knife mark, and I dropped the saw plate into the trough. I had good, clean cuts, and the legs are pretty close to square on the ends. Pretty close. There are 1 or 2 ends that could use some work to make it a little better. My question is, how will trying to use a hand plane to square up the ends as best I can work? How square do I need to get the legs? More than likely, I will have to shim the legs anyway because I doubt my floor is level and smooth. What's the risk of chasing my tail here? So...
Well, you don't really need to chase your tail, I don't think. But you can certainly get them square with a hand plane. It's not that hard to do. And, I mean, what I would do, because we don't know if this guy has a table saw.
Mm-hmm.
Having a table saw would make it a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
But let me describe the all hand plane way first, because I've done stuff like this before. So what he needs to do is get his combo square and his marking knife and find the low point on the foot of the leg. Mm-hmm. All right? And then use that as a reference point and scribe all around the 4 faces of the leg and make a cut, make a mark, cut it.
Yep.
And that shows you where with the hand, what you need to hand plane down to so that your the bottom of the leg is square and flat. And then you need to sharpen your hand plane blade. Preferably, if you have a low angle bevel up dealy bob, that would be awesome. Those work pretty well on ingrain. So sharpen it up and really get it sharp. And then hand plane down to the scribe line that you just made. And because it's cut with a knife, it's not going to tear out. And you have a reference point to work down to. And actually, this works really well. I mean, I've done it with square stuff. I've also done it with miters. So it's actually possible to make a perfect 45-degree miter with this method. And I've done it several times, and it's not that hard as long as your plane blade is sharp. Mm-hmm. Did I mention that the plane blade needs to be sharp? Because it really does. You need to sharpen it freshly because that'll cut through the end grain much more easily with far less resistance. And instead of getting across the end grain, you'll get nice, clean swipes, and you'll have a nice, smooth foot or bottom of the leg there.
And if you had a table saw, you could do a cut, turn the leg over, another cut, and then finish it off with a handsaw and clean up that little bit that's left with a hand plane.
Yep, you can do that. Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind here, I don't know what type of bench he's making or what the base is, how it's constructed, but I would also stress that not only do you need to have all 4 legs, you don't need to have the foot flat, but perfectly flat and square. But it's important that they're all the same length so that when you start to lay out your joinery and you do all this kind of stuff, it's much easier for the layout. And once you put it all together, it is square and on a level surface, in theory, would be flat. On a theoretical level surface, it would be flat. But because you're going to shim, if it's just a tiny little bit off, big deal. You're going to put some shims in there.
All right. Next question comes from Jared, who writes, I've been woodworking for about 6 years, and I now have about $1,400 that I can spend on tools or a piece of machinery for my shop. I have a few basic tools, like 2 refurbished hand planes, a number 9 Miller's Falls, and a pre-World War II Stanley number 6 that are working well, a dovetail saw, some chisels, marking gauges, impact drill, etc., the basic hand tools. I'm wondering, what would you recommend for me to buy to get going? I'd like to buy a piece of machinery like a bandsaw, but I'm wondering if it would be better to buy a few nice hand and power tools like a router, better hand planes, etc. If you think I should get the machinery, I'd like to invest in a nice new piece than something I need to refurbish or replace later on. I'd rather get right to woodworking than rebuilding tools. So there's 2 ways to go about this. We don't know if he has a joiner and a planer.
Right. He doesn't mention that. But let's answer it this way. This is how I'm just going to run roughshod over you today, Ed. All right.
Well, I'm saying let's take it 2 ways.
Well, so first of all, if you want to buy a bandsaw, which is a good first machine to get, what I would recommend, last year our 14-inch bandsaw review, the best overall was the Laguna 1412. 14 funky straight up and down line 12. And that is about $1,100 or $1,200, and that is a fantastic bandsaw, and it's not one that you'll need to replace later on. So that would be a good place to start. But more important than a bandsaw is a way to mill lumber, right? Because you got to mill your lumber. So there's 2 ways to mill lumber, right? You can either do it what we call the smart way, with a joiner and a planer, or you can do it the enthusiastic way, which would involve hand planes.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Send all hate mail to Asa Christiana and Mike Pekovich. So I would say, if he doesn't have a way to mill lumber, Ed, don't you think that? That's what you need to be able to do. You need to mill lumber.
So a decent benchtop planer is going to set him back like $6.
No, well, that's
5-6 bills.
That would be the high end.
DeWalt.
That would be like a DeWalt 735, which is really nice. But you could get something else like the Rigid. I don't know if Rigid.
That's probably $400.
Okay, but so you're going to spend $400 to $600 on a benchtop planer.
Joiner. This is where it gets funky because you really want an 8-inch joiner. You don't want a 4-inch joiner or a 6-inch joiner.
Right.
I bought mine used, and I know you're saying like I didn't have to do anything to mine. It was in good shape. It was an old Delta, because those things last for so long. But if you wanted to buy a new one,
you could do it. You could probably buy for $1,400. You could probably buy a new 8-inch joiner and a benchtop planer. I think you could. I just don't want to say absolutely, but I'm pretty certain that you can do that if you choose wisely. And I think you could get good machines and good machines that you won't have to replace until you're ready for a bigger size, particularly in the joiner. But that's the thing. We also don't really know what kind of work he wants to do or what he wants to build. So it's like maybe he doesn't want to build stuff where he needs rough lumber, in which case, okay, maybe you can get by without a joiner and a planer. But I would start with a joiner and planer, and in that case, you have to decide what you want to do. Do you want to sweat a lot and because you enjoy it, and that's great? Then you need to get hand planes that allow you to mill lumber. If you want to mill lumber, but you'd rather do it with electricity, then you need a joiner and a planer.
I remember going up to Andrew Hunter's shop in Acord, New York.
In Acorn, New York?
Acord. And we did a video on
which is
planing
his
lumber.
Home address and his phone number too, Ed.
on planing lumber. It says it in the magazine where he's from.
Oh.
We did a video on planing lumber by hand, milling lumber by hand. And I just remember sitting there thinking to myself the entire time, like, you first of all, Andrew, love you, but you're nuts. And second of all, no freaking way.
Yes.
It is too much of a pain in the,
Yeah, if you're doing something small, I'll mill up stuff by hand. That's not a big deal.
But he was doing like 6 foot long boards. I'm like, what are you doing? You nuts?
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, I just wonder, back in the day when all they had was hand tools,
Yeah.
I don't think it was the master milling boards, It was little Olaf that just started it's like,
Oh, of course.
Olaf,
Yes.
for 6 years, go in and joint and plane.
Go and get the board stretcher.
Yes. So we can't really tell you what particular thing to buy, but you have to make decisions about.
But if he doesn't need a joiner planer,
yeah,
then I was almost thinking, well, wait, maybe he
Bandsaw.
gets a bandsaw. That's his big money purchase, and the smaller money purchase is a router.
yep, get a handheld router.
Yeah.
But it really depends on how he wants to work. Which I wish he had told us. Does he want to do hand tools only? Because he wants to do hand tools only. You can get a lot of stuff for $1,400. So maybe Jared can write us back and tell us that, and specify that I'd rather work with hand tools than power tools, or vice versa. These are the types of things I'd like to build, and this is the type of lumber I normally buy. And if we know that, and also if he tells us, does he have a table saw, all that, because it doesn't sound like he does. Mm-hmm. But then we could give a more specific answer.
All right. I say we head into our next segment of the day. That's going to be all-time favorite tool of all time for this week, where we confess our love for our most cherished, beloved, and adored tools. So, Matt, you're going to go first. I have a notation here, micro smoothing plane.
Yes.
New product here?
Not a new product. But before I get to that, actually, because I'm going to give 2.
Oh, nice.
Because once again, I am going to endorse or to wax poetically about...
I believe it's wax poetic.
Wax poetic.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
doctor.
Okay, shut up. Because I was just using it.
Mm-hmm.
The 16-inch Italian jointer that we have in the shop here at Fine Woodworking. It is the nicest machine.
Is that CMI Italian?
SCMI.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's Italian.
Never knew that.
Yeah,
It's a pretty hot machine.
Man, let me tell you, it's the best best tool I've ever used, hands down. Any tool, hand tool, power tool. It is the most awesome thing that I've ever used. It's glorious. Okay. So, anyways, but back to my thing, what I actually did. So,
How much do you think that 16-inch joiner?
new,
Yeah.
you're looking at
10
20
grand?
20 grand.
20?
maybe.
You think it's that
Yeah,
much?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yes.
All right. So what's your real all-time favorite tool of all time for this week?
So, as you know, as everyone knows, because tons of people mentioned it to me this past weekend, I like to make small
And
small
here
things.
comes Matt's music box theme.
So I've been doing this 52 box in 52 weeks thing, right? And so a lot of them have been really small, where some of the sides are less than 2 inches tall. And so I need a smoother for that. And my number 4 is just too big. And
Didn't Stanley sell a number 1 salesman's model? Like a little
I don't know
teeny
what-
tiny smoother?
yeah, you can still buy. I mean, Lee Nielsen makes one. I think Wood River has one out now, but I'm not buying that.
No.
It's just not. Not what I want. And so I've mentioned before, I was making a plane, and the wooden plane, and that's ultimately what I was going to make, a little tiny smoother for this stuff. So, but I'm not done with that, and it's not going to get done anytime soon because I have so much other stuff going on, and not to mention making at least one box every week. So I got to thinking, I've got 3 block planes, one of them of which is a low angle Lee Nielsen block plane with an adjustable mouth.
Okay.
And a lot of people use low angle jacks or low angle smoothers. And what you can do with those is they're bedded at 12 degrees, but you can buy a blade and put a really high bevel on it and get the effective cutting angle, get an actual cutting angle of like 44, 45 degrees. So what I did was buy a second blade for my my little low angle smoother this weekend.
Okay.
And I went back out to my bench and I sharpened it up and I put a 32 degree bevel on it.
32 plus 12
Is 44.
Okay.
So that's right there in the ballpark.
Yeah.
And put it in my little plane, closed up the mouth really tight like I would on my smoother, and whoosh, 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 beautiful shavings. And so it worked great. And so that's, for now at least, going to be my little smoothing plane. And I can switch out the blades when I need to get back to a lower angle for ingrained or whatever.
All right.
It's pretty awesome, though.
So I'm going to confess before I do mine, a little disclaimer here.
It's a lame answer.
It's going to be a Mike Pekovich answer.
It's a horrible answer.
But I had so much fun doing it. It's not a number 2 pencil.
Not a number 2 pencil.
Not a shop rag.
Is it a 6H pencil?
It's Steam.
Steam.
So
And not the online video streaming service.
no.
Not video, a video game service.
Oh,
video game
Okay.
service.
I don't know what kind of online channel you're looking at. It's called Steam.
It's a video game
Okay,
service.
that's good. I hope so. No, I had I rarely play with Steam, so whenever I have, it's just like, wow, this is magic. And I'm redoing we have a detached garage that has an in-law apartment on our property, and in it, there's a sleeping loft up about 8 feet high, and there's a little spiral staircase that goes up to it, and it goes through a hole in the floor. And I laid a new floor in the loft and did all this stuff, and then I noticed that, well, the opening that you go up through, now you can see the edge of all that hardwood flooring I put down, and it looks crummy. It needs to be finished with some trim. And like, oh, what am I going to do for trim? Because it's a big curve. So I had, I didn't have any oak. I was hoping I had oak that I could steam bend. I didn't have any. I found some poplar. Poplar doesn't bend that great, but it bends. So I steamed the heck out of it, and then I didn't have a form, nor did I want to build one because it would have been a big form. So I just steamed it for an hour. It was like a 1/4 inch thick, and then I just started screwing it in. And those are my clamps, just all the way around, and just
Of course, why not?
perfect. Absolutely awesome. Although I will say that, poplar, it's funny, the difference when you bend a hardwood and you bend something softer like poplar, it's a huge difference. I mean, oak bends so cleanly.
Yeah.
The poplar, you really have to muscle around. I mean, even an hour for a 1/4 inch. I mean, that's a long time for a 1/4 inch of thickness.
Well, I've never bent poplar or steam bent poplar, but I will point out that your poplar was kiln dried.
Yes.
So
True.
it doesn't really
It's
make
not going to
it.
bend.
Yeah.
It's to begin with, you're going to have a harder time.
Yes.
But it bent all right. I didn't get any,
I mean,
any
you were
tearing
lucky.
or anything.
It was a big radius, a big soft
It was.
radius. So
It was.
You probably, how thick was it?
It was about a 1/4 inch.
And it wouldn't bend to that on its own?
No.
No?
I tried. I was curious if I could get it to bend on its own, but no.
Yeah.
The
1/8 of an inch probably would have. That's all it really needed to be, right?
Yes, but 1/8 of an inch, it would have caught all the imperfections of what it was being
I see.
glued to. I wanted something thicker so it would be smoother when it
Mm-hmm.
went around. So anyhow, the power of steam. But yes, as you point out, and it's something I was getting to, in general, you don't, bending kiln-dried lumber is more difficult than air-dried lumber.
Well, I think technically it's not supposed to work.
No, it works.
But it does.
totally works.
You're just not supposed to do it because,
It's just more of a pain in the ass.
well, what kiln drying does is heat the lignin up
lignins.
and it locks them in place. So they can't, even if you reheat them, they won't loosen so that the fibers can slide past each other, right?
So, Professor,
Yes.
I say we move on to our next question. Comes from Daryl, who writes, "Thanks for taking my question concerning adjusting the bandsaw tracking to correct for blade drift. In your answer, you mentioned a Michael Fortune video. We probably mentioned the Asa Christiana video too, on how to change a bandsaw blade, which I've watched a dozen or so times, and it is indeed excellent. My intention and guides all seem good. My hope is that you could add a video about the tracking adjustment for drift, since the Fortune video says to just center the blade. Your suggestion on the podcast about the tire being too flat is plausible. Mine looks about like the one in the Fortune video. I'm not sure you can tell that by watching the video, but this is what he asserts. Is that too flat? I understand that the crown and the tire will tend to angle the blade left or right based on the blade's position on the tire. Is it possible that the blade guides straighten the blade back out?
No.
I have a brand new, now here's where it gets interesting. I have a brand new 1/2-inch wood slicer, 3 TPI blade, and I get 12 degrees of drift even when cutting 1/4 inch walnut. So a dull blade or clogged gullets are not the likely cause. So we were talking about this earlier, and I'm still wondering if his tire needs replacement.
What I'm wondering is,
And if the
who
go
in
ahead.
the world measures their drift angle
Hey.
that precisely?
a woodworker,
Yeah, an engineer or somebody.
so he must have taken the time to make sure that the fence was parallel to the miter slot,
I mean, so
miter gauge slot.
that could be one problem, because even if you have drift, you can still cut straight and cut boards or like rip to a consistent width or resaw to a consistent thickness if the fence is adjusted for that drift. It has to be parallel to the drift. So one is just fix that. Two, clearly the thing is it's not centered on the wheel the way it can be. So it could be the case.
Some new urethane tires.
Just some new urethane tires. I don't know how much crown is on his wheels. I don't know how much there should be on the wheels of his bandsaw, because he doesn't even mention what size it is, does he?
I don't believe he does.
Yeah. So
No.
the bigger the bandsaw, the less crown they have. So I don't know, but it's certainly something to try. The other thing is to try to center it better, because you just may not have it centered right. And it's got to be the way I do it, and it works for me, is to center it on the overall width of the blade. And not I just
Some
so in
people
case you
center it.
understand-
Some people center it to the bottom of the gullet. Is that what you're getting at here?
he could be doing something like that, and discounting the teeth
Right.
as part of the width. But you got to take that into account and center it on the total width of the blade. So,
All right.
but otherwise, switch out your tires, switch out your wheels and the table and the base, and while you're at it, just buy a new bandsaw.
All right.
That's the solution to everything. Buy new tools.
Another question from Marsh, who writes, you talk very often about the sharpening of chisels and plane irons and about how getting these tools sharp could be the answer to some of the problems listeners have. You may start at 1,000 grit and go up to maybe 15,000 to obtain a bright, glossy, ultimate edge. I have one of those machines with a leather wheel where you add honing compound. Do any of you use this in your sharpening procedure? If not, why not? If so, do you just do it freehand? I use an old barber's strop.
We do not use your wheel with leather on it. It's because it's in your shop and not in ours. No, none of us use a strop at all. Mike is a huge opponent of the strop, and I have to say I think I agree with him. The strop, I believe, is handy for guys who I think it's part of the sharpening regimen if you sharpen by hand, because when you sharpen by hand and you have a flat bevel, you have a tendency to round the bevel, and you may not end up getting to the cutting edge and honing the cutting edge. And so the strop kind of it'll follow the round that's on the bevel and will allow you to sort of get to the cutting edge. I don't like that technique, and I don't use it. So I would say don't use your leather wheel. That's really a turning tool gizmo, and that there's nothing shameful about using a honing guide, and don't let anyone tell you any differently, because I woodwork a lot every day. Every single day I'm in my shop, and I do not sharpen enough to develop the muscle memory to sharpen my plane blades freehand. And I'm not ashamed to use a honing guide at all. And
Fine woodworking's dark secret.
I mean, it's so ridiculous that you guys get into arguments about this. And the only thing I have to say in the end is, show me what you've made.
Yeah.
I don't care how you sharpen. Show me what you made. But anyways, and you only need 3 sharpening stones. You need a coarse, a medium, and a fine. And those grits are normally, I think we just discussed this not long ago, around 1,000, somewhere like 4,000 or 6,000, and then something like 70 or 80,000. I'm just kidding.
70 or 80,000. Wow.
I'm just kidding. An 8,000 stone is fine. Mine happens to be a 13,000, but that's no.
Well,
They make 10,000s, so you just need 3. And have we completely answered the question?
yeah, he doesn't need
what's
to
our
use
question?
that leather strop.
Yeah, none of
wheel.
us use it. We don't like that. We prefer to, like chisel blades, okay to hollow grind. And if you hollow grind it, you end up with 2 points, and it's real easy actually to balance that and
For wider chisels.
to freehand that. So that's, if you want to freehand sharpen, you should be hollow grinding.
Although be careful, as the chisels get narrower, it gets harder to...
Yeah, 1/8-inch chisels are difficult regardless.
I have a little jig I use for those.
Before I got the narrow blade guide from Veritas, I did freehand my 1/8" chisel. What I would do is only pull it back to hone it. But then, or you can just do a flat bevel and use a honing guide. And like I said, there's nothing shameful in that.
It's like standing in the back corner of his room, like cowering.
Yeah, I mean, and there's nothing unmanly or nothing.
All right.
It's like,
calm down there, Matt.
well, a lot of people imply that you're not a real woodworker if you don't freehand sharpen, and I've seen that all over the internet for as long as I've been in woodworking. It's
Really?
just nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you freehand sharpen? Like my peepaw did.
Well, let's see what you built.
Yeah, show me what you built. Shut up and show me what you built.
I got plenty. Don't worry about it. I don't show it to just anybody.
It's like, I only woodwork with old teeth and I hone them up. You guys are using tools.
All right. We get lots of comments on our page in the iTunes store, as well as through email. And every week, we like to acknowledge the kind folks who leave words of encouragement up there. Here it goes for this week from Artifact Woodworker. These guys keep it light, informative, and fun. Love the show's humor and guest segments, as well as the all-time favorite tool of all time. Recommended. That being said, you all got some super cheeseball segue sound effects. Sorry, had to throw that in there.
I like that he said y'all, but I would like to point out to everyone that you miswrote y'all because it's Y apostrophe.
It's Y apostrophe.
Yeah.
I didn't type that though. I copy pasted.
Oh, you did. Oh, so he miswrote y'all.
I think so. Yeah.
I see.
From Viking 3, top notch. I have listened to all the podcasts, and I have learned a lot and laughed a lot. Fine Woodworking is my go-to for any woodworking questions and learning. Thanks for the hard work, and keep it up. And finally, from Kawi Nut, fun and informative. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and frequently the non-showbiz podcasts are terrible. Just two guys not knowing how to talk on mic. These guys are comfortable together, and it makes for a natural-sounding conversation. Request: work in more Godfather, Apocalypse Now, Scarface, Platoon, and other movie references. Love the show. Thanks.
See, some people like our sense of humor.
Nice, yeah.
And all the nonsense we get up
half
to.
a dozen. Anyhow, listen, that about wraps it up this week for Shop Talk Live. Thanks to our sponsor, Minwax. We'll be back again in 2 weeks on July 31st, 2015 for our next episode. In the meantime, show us a little love by leaving a comment on iTunes, and by all means, click that 5-star rating. Don't forget to send your questions and comments into shoptalk@taunton.com, TAUNTON.com. You can catch the podcast via iTunes, stream it on your computer at shoptalklive.com, or catch us on iHeartRadio. Cheers, everybody.